Thank you so much to the Society of Magnetic Resonance Angiography for the invitation to speak at your 32nd Annual International Conference. The invitation is truly an honor. The year 2020 has been a bit tumultuous, to say the least, and I would like to thank each and every one of you for sharing your time, for listening, and for participating in this discussion on the power of diversity. I have no relevant financial disclosures, but I would like to give a thank you to the sources who have funded our diversity efforts. This includes the Joan Giambalvo Fund for the Advancement of Women in Medicine through the American Medical Association Foundation, and an EDI seed grant funded through the Vanderbilt University Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. My goals in the next 20 minutes or so are to present you with the concepts of diversity, equity, and inclusion, to offer a historical perspective of diversity in radiology, and most importantly, to emphasize the importance of diversity. To start with a few definitions. Diversity is the representation of all our varied identities and differences collectively and as individuals. Equity seeks to ensure the fair treatment and access to information and resources for all. Inclusion builds a culture of belonging by actively inviting the contribution and participation of all people. What I think is most important to recognize is that inclusion is active. It takes time, it takes energy, and it takes effort to build a culture of inclusion. This is a fantastic graphic put together by ABT Associates explaining the relationship between exclusion and inclusion. While these definitions are tailored to education, they can be applied to any organization or activity. Exclusion is when anyone is directly or indirectly prevented from or denied access to an organization or activity. Segregation occurs when an activity or initiative is provided in a separate environment for some people. Integration is the process of placing individuals into the mainstream organization without designating specific activities to aid with adjustment. Inclusion is a process of system reform to overcome existing barriers to provide an equitable environment for all. Again, inclusion is an active process. So what's the point? Why should we advocate for diversity and inclusion? I believe there is power in diversity. When we think about power, we think about strength, capability, competence, impact. In physics, we think of energy per time period. In a statistical analysis, you think of the probability that you have correctly rejected the null hypothesis. Power requires an adequate sample size. Scientifically, when we think about power, we think about this sample size, strength in numbers. The power of diversity in radiology reflects both the strength and impact of diversity and the importance of a diverse sample size. So take a minute to look at this picture, and I wonder if anyone recognizes the event this is from. This is the 1931 ACR Gold Medal ceremony. Specifically, this is Marie Curie receiving her ACR Gold Medal. Marie Curie was the first woman to win the Nobel Prize. In 1903, she won this award for physics for recognition of research on the radiation phenomena. She was also the first person to win 2 Nobel Prizes. She won her second for chemistry in 1911 for the discovery of radium and polonium. It was this discovery that really jump-started the field of radiology we know today. She is the first and to date only mother Nobel Prize winner of a daughter Nobel Prize winner. To put her accomplishments into perspective, before she was awarded the ACR Gold Medal in 1931, she had already received 2 Nobel Prizes. That's a pretty high bar to set for the first woman to receive an ACR Gold Medal. Marie Curie is one of the original innovators of radiology. It's this type of innovation from an individual who may be different than those around her, with a different way of thinking, that should be embraced. We should embrace diversity in training backgrounds and geographical backgrounds and racial, ethnic, and gender identity. This diversity generates diversity in thought. There is power in diversity because it encourages innovation. But why else? Diversity in the medical workforce directly impacts patient care. leads to higher quality of care and better health outcomes. The data from this study looked at 58,000 physicians from a Medicare patient population in over 1.6 million hospitalizations. These charts display on the left 30-day mortality rates, and on the right 30-day readmission rates among 5 quintiles of healthy versus sick patients. The darker greenish blue bars represent female physicians, and the lighter greenish blue bars represent male physicians. And you can see that for each quintile, female physicians have lower 30-day mortality rates and lower 30-day readmission rates. Why? There's speculation this might be in part due to the facts that women physicians are more likely to adhere to guidelines, more likely to provide preventative care, and more often use patient-centered communication. There are also sex differences in medical legal action against doctors. This is a meta-analysis of medical legal action against physicians that shows male doctors have 2.5 times the odds of being involved in medical legal action, defined as disciplinary action by a medical board, malpractice, or other complaints or criminal cases, when compared to female doctors. What about the fiscal bottom line? For companies with gender diversity in the first quartile, there's been a 15% demonstrated increase in financial performance when compared to the fourth quartile. An even greater increase of 35% is seen in companies with racial ethnic diversity in the first quartile when compared to the fourth quartile. Why these increases in financial performance with increasing diversity? Increasing diversity results in improvements in customer relations, in employee satisfaction, and improved decision-making. When you look at the overall 9 dimensions of organizational performance, companies with 3 or more women on the executive board have better organizational performance. More diversity amongst board members can broaden perspective and talent, improve problem-solving techniques, improve recruitment techniques, increase effectiveness of education methods. While this is an example seen for gender diversity, the same principles apply broadly to all types of diversity. Diverse leaders apply different leadership behaviors. For example, women leaders tend to apply more people development, expectations and rewards, and offer more role modeling. They apply slightly more participative decision-making, while men tend to apply more individualist decision-making and more control and corrective action. This isn't to say that one leadership style is better than another. It's more to encourage a diversity in leadership styles. Increasing diversity in leadership styles improves 3 main performance parameters: accountability, effectiveness of leadership teams, and the work environment and values. A more diverse, inclusive workforce can address existing health disparities and inequities. Health disparities are any difference in health outcomes between groups of people. For example, women get breast cancer more often than men. Health inequities are also differences in health outcomes, but they are systemic, unfair, unjust, and most importantly, they are avoidable. An example of a health inequity is the rate at which white and black women receive screening mammograms. For every 10 white women who get a screening mammogram, only 7 or 8 black women might. Why is this? There's no biological difference. This is a health inequity. Ultimately, a more diverse workforce can help to achieve health equity. Health equity is the absence of avoidable, unfair, or remediable differences in health outcomes among groups of people, whether those groups are defined socially, economically, demographically, or geographically, or by other means of stratification. So what does diversity and inclusion look like more specifically in the field of radiology? This is Elizabeth Blackwell. In 1847, she became the first woman admitted to medical school in our country, the Geneva Medical School in Western New York. Sadly, many speculate that her admission was actually a joke. She applied to medical school. The deans who reviewed the application didn't know what to do with her application. They were confused by an application from a woman. So they decided to turn the decision over to the student body, who voted to admit Miss Blackwell. So where are we now, 175 years later? Data from the AAMC says that in 2019, for the first time ever, the majority of medical students are women. It also shows that in the 2019-2020 academic year, there was a 6.3% increase in the number of Hispanic, Latino, or Spanish origin matriculants, a 3.2% increase in Black or African American matriculants, and a 5.5% increase in American Indian or Alaska Native matriculants. This is for overall medical students in our country. But how does radiology measure up in racial and ethnic diversity? This outstanding work from Chapman et al. Shows that while 12.6% of the U.S. population is Black, only 6.8% of medical students are Black. Further, only 3.1% of diagnostic radiology residents are Black, and only 2% of faculty. Similarly, for those of Hispanic Latino ethnicity, 16.3% of the U.S. population is Hispanic Latino. Only 7.4% of medical students are Hispanic Latino. Further, only 4.8% of diagnostic radiology residents are Hispanic Latino, and 3.8% of faculty. How about for gender diversity? Looking at gender breakdown by age offers a way to look at women's entry into radiology over time. 26% of radiologists under the age of 35 are women, reflective of the current radiology matriculant gender breakdown. The gender breakdown of radiologists in older age groups portrays the historically lower numbers of women pursuing radiology. The overall percentage of women is quite low and reflects the percent of women radiology residency applicants over time. This percentage has remained relatively stagnant over the past several years, between 25 to 30%. Currently, only 22% of all practicing radiologists are women. Diversity among NIH Research Award winners has also been studied. These figures represent data from 2008 to 2012, stratified by white non-Hispanic populations, Black non-Hispanic populations, Asian non-Hispanic populations, and Hispanic or Latino populations. The horizontal dashed line at 1 indicates the transition point between under and over-representation when compared to the relevant labor pool. From left to right, the bar graphs indicate advancements in research career stage, from high school to bachelor's degrees to advanced degrees such as master's, postdoctoral awards, K awardees, and R01 level awards. Interestingly, white, Black, and Hispanic women are overrepresented at the postdoctoral and mentored K positions. However, there is a significant decrease in representation of these groups at the R01 award levels. This same trend is seen for both Black men and women. All groups except white males are underrepresented in the R01 equivalent award level. With regard to academic departments, the AAMC ranks radiology among the academic specialties with the lowest proportion of full-time women, 28%, and among the lower percentage of chairs who are women, 16%. The ACR Human Workforces Survey shows that only 13% of all leadership roles in academic and private practice radiology, defined as managing partners, presidents, executive committee members, chairs, or vice chairs, are held by women. Of all men in radiology, 15% hold leadership roles. Of all women in radiology, only 8% hold leadership roles. And if we remember, companies with more women on executive boards had better overall organizational performance, better financial performance, and better quality of care. So where are the women leaders in radiology? Why is there a diminishing trend from medical school to residency to leadership? We now know that almost 50% of medical students are women, and only 29% of radiology applicants are women. Only 27% of radiology residents are women, and of 100 practicing radiologists, only 21 are women. At the leadership level, out of 100 radiology leaders, only 13 are women. We have excellent data on gender differences in academic radiology. When adjusting for all factors such as publications, grants held, and clinical trials led, data suggests that men and women are promoted at equivalent rates. But those factors themselves are not equal. The raw data show that more women are at the assistant professor level, 65% versus 53% for men, and more men are at the full professor level, 26% versus 16% for women. Men on average have more total publications, 18 for men versus 12 for women, and more men have NIH grants, 130 for men versus 29 for women. What can we do to increase diversity in radiology? How can we harness the power of diversity, both the impact and strength and the power of number, so that we can improve equitable patient care, offer more diversity of perspective and talent, improve problem-solving techniques, increase the effectiveness of educational methods, and improve overall organizational success? In 2013, our institution developed a diversity plan. This plan was co-developed by our chair, Reed Omery, and our first associate vice chair for diversity, Dr. Stephanie Spotswood. This plan developed conscious, directed efforts to improve diversity in our department. It began as an intentional recruitment diversity plan for the residency program, to increase the recruitment of women and minorities, and to attempt to address bias within our institution. Our Office of Diversity and Inclusion was created with the vision to be a culturally diverse, inclusive, and welcoming environment for trainees, faculty, and staff who are equipped to provide excellent care to a diverse patient population. The Office of Diversity and Inclusion has made efforts to increase the diversity of the applicant pool, including website improvement, earlier exposure to radiology, summer internship programs, increasing mentorship opportunities, diversifying our recruitment committee, implementing a second look weekend for underrepresented minority applicants, offering bias training throughout the department, offering an annual diversity lectureship series, and implementing a Women in Radiology program designed to foster career development for women in radiology with both academic, clinical, and research backgrounds. Our Women in Radiology program first started with a needs assessment to better understand the needs of the women in our department. We asked the question, is professional advancement important to you? And 89% of the women indicated that professional advancement is important to them. We also asked the question, do you believe fewer women than men pursue academic promotions? While 89% of the women found professional advancement important to themselves, 80% believed that fewer women than men pursue academic promotions. We designed a series of educational modules and speakers to meet the identified needs of the women in the department, and developed a website and posted meeting recaps and any educational materials that might benefit the women in the department. At the end of a year, we found that 86% of the women agreed that this program provided a better understanding of promotional guidelines. 75% indicated improved access to faculty development opportunities. 62% indicated improved access to career advancement opportunities, and 69% believed the program offered more opportunities for mentorship. Our Women in Radiology activities, in addition to the educational modules, include a quarterly in-focus newsletter highlighting women faculty members, mentorship opportunities, and an annual Women in Radiology lectureship. This program has had a dramatic impact on the visibility and representation of women in our department. We now have 7 women who are full professors, 3 of 9 total vice chairs are women, 3 of 11 total section chiefs, and 3 of 9 total program directors. So this begs the question, do programs addressing recruitment and mentorship and bias actually make a difference? We have been tracking the percentages for our residency program over time for our underrepresented minority residents and women residents. The blue line represents the percentage of women residents in our program over time. The red line represents the percentage of underrepresented minority residents in our program over time compared to the national averages. Our diversity program was implemented in 2013. If you look at the red bar, you can see that in 2015, we started to notice a steady increase in the percentage of underrepresented minority residents in our program. Our Women in Radiology program was implemented in 2015. If you look at the blue line, you can see that the percentage of women residents in our program has started to increase steadily in 2017. Conscious, directed efforts in recruitment and mentorship have impacted diversity in our department. How can leadership address diversity? They can ensure that hiring, promotions, and reviews are fair, offer flexible work opportunities, invest in employee unconscious bias training, focus on accountability and results. It is extremely important to have buy-in and support from leadership at the very top levels. How can bias be addressed? Both conscious and unconscious bias must be addressed. This can be done through bias training and online courses. I find it important to think about instances in my own life where I have seen bias. I often don't notice them right when they happen, but I do recognize them retrospectively. I think it's important to address bias immediately when it's seen, to recognize it and to address it. It's also important to recognize that truly addressing bias requires an overall culture change. We also must recognize the unique barriers in the field of diversity and inclusion. We must know that a minority tax exists and try to avoid it. Underrepresented minority men and women should not bear the burden of encouraging more underrepresented minorities and women to join the field. It's also important to avoid pigeonholing. Women and underrepresented minorities should not be pigeonholed into work focused on women and underrepresented minorities. These faculty members should be encouraged to pursue their own personal research interests. So have we made any progress? Looking back to the picture of Marie Curie in 1931 receiving her gold medal from the ACR Board of Chancellors, this was not a very diverse-looking group. Now, 89 years later, a photo of a more recent Board of Chancellors shows a great deal of diversity. Gender diversity, racial and ethnic diversity. 10 of 32 members of the Board of Chancellors are women, and the current chair of the Board of Chancellors is a woman. Several editors-in-chief of radiology journals are women. As we continue to improve diversity in radiology, we will harness the power of diversity. This diversity can improve the financial performance, the overall organizational performance, and most importantly, improve quality of patient care and drive equitable patient care. So I ask you to remember examples from your own lives, to recognize and address bias in the moment, and to help shape the future of diversity in radiology. Thank you so much for your time. Please do not hesitate to reach out to me at any time with questions.